I want you to sort of tell me why actually, Darren, you're being a miserable bloody sod. Pack it in. This country is an absolutely fantastic country, and I'd say, Laurence, I agree, but we're not going to the dogs. We are actually going to reverse the culture. The Reclaim Party's going to be at the forefront of that fight, and shut your mouth, Darren, everything's going to be fine. Tell me why I'm absolutely wrong.
We exist, Darren, because a hole has appeared in our culture, and that hole needs to be filled by people who want to celebrate the best things about our country. The people that want to be free in their expression, they want to be able to use their language, and they want to support everyone of all different skin colours and sexual orientations and ethnicities, and unite under the greatness that is Great Britain. And we just need to be reminded of it. It's coming, and it's going to be good.
Hiya and welcome to Reasons UK with me, Darren Grimes. As ever, if you enjoy today's show, please do consider hitting that little subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future content. We're also over halfway to our fundraising target on our GoFundMe page, so please do check that out if you're in a position to do so, and keep Reasoned free as well as Britain. Now anyway, I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by Laurence Fox of the Reclaim Party. We're going to be discussing everything from the Reclaim Party, big tech, censorship, education, charity and forgiveness, as well as how the Reclaim Party will be at the forefront of the battle in standing up for our cultural inheritance, something which I think is going to be increasingly important over the next few years before that next general election. Hiya, Laurence. How are you doing?
So sad you're not in prison, haven't you?
I don't think you're alone in that view, to be honest.
It's a national scandal. You should be in jail by now.
Yeah. Well, actually, that is, at risk of sounding like an absolute massive narcissist, that is the first thing I wanted to ask you about. That story obviously involves me, and just I wanted to ask your thoughts on it. And as you know, a few weeks ago I was under investigation by the Met Police and threatened with arrest for stirring up racial hatred, a horrible thing to be accused of. And this was seen as an unprecedented use of the Public Order Act to actually regulate speech and debate. Now, fortunately, it was all dropped after support by people like yourself, thank you very much, by the way, and many others. Were you at all surprised by this, Laurence, when I texted you and said, listen, you'll not, bloody well believe what's happened?
I was very surprised. I thought this is appalling, and it's all getting very out of hand. And I think the police should be allowed to do their job, which is to investigate actual crime, and not waste public money investigating the inside of people's minds and their intentions. It was very clear from your interview, which I watched, what was going on. And David Starkey said what David Starkey said. You are in no way accountable to that. And I think it's appalling that you're investigating. But it's just a sign of our politicised police force. And, that's something that needs to be seriously addressed. But I have a plan for it.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, I can't tell you more because I'm not stupid. But I will... Put it this way: it's a big plan, and everyone will go, "Oh wow,
Okay.
an achievable one."
Fine, I'm happy with that. I look forward to hearing it. Now, Laurence, can I ask you what you think about censorship in general? I think I've got a pretty rough idea. But if I just set out what I mean by that, we've seen Twitter and other big social media giants have been dragged in front of US senators this week to explain why they were censoring stories on Hunter Biden, the Democratic presidential nominee, Joe Biden's son. Now, they obviously didn't do any of this when they were crazy conspiracy, theories being pushed out to delegitimize our vote for Brexit through dodgy data or Russian interference. Both have been proven to be palpable nonsense. And you've seen similar such attempts to delegitimize the vote for Trump as well. Just how worried do you think we should be, one, by attempts to attack outcomes at the ballot box, and secondly, by actually the censorship of ideas that they don't like of big tech?
I think it's terrifying that these so-called platforms are censoring different political views, and particularly the arrogance of just censoring one side of the argument, which is what they were doing in terms of the Hunter Biden stuff. And I think, these are not elected people. They don't have a right. They should be held accountable. They're basically publishers, and they should be held accountable to that fact, and therefore available to be sued. I mean, we're living in a technocracy, aren't we? So it's very scary, and the arrogance with which they do it, and the lack of care, and they turned Simon Dolan off yesterday, didn't they, for a day, while he's taking the government to court over lockdowns, and it's just. They act as if they're self-appointed representatives of the entire world, which is terrifying. Seeing as they're not, and I don't have any Twitter and Instagram, wherever, Facebook. These places are meant to be places where one can speak freely, and they very clearly are not.
Are you a bit worried about that, though, given that I imagine social media will be a real vehicle for your party?
Well, I think we'll have to see. It's ultimately, I don't know where it all went wrong. I thought what happened was we elected governments, and governments were there to represent us. And if these big, huge tech giants are behaving in a totally undemocratic way and censoring people, then the government should step in and do what the government can do to stop that. But yes, to a degree, but I'm used to it. I've been shadow banned and knocked around by these people for ages. So they don't play fair. And also in standard parlance, they're the exact thing they accuse you of, aren't they? As the Hunter Biden stuff shows.
What, out of interest, how do you rate Trump's chances at all next week?
I think I don't even believe the pollsters to a degree in anymore. I think they're in the pockets as well. I think if Trump doesn't get voted in next week, we're going to be in huge trouble. I think it'll be really bad, and that's not because I particularly think he's the world's most wonderful man, but he is a tough-skinned, thick-skinned libertarian essentially. And he's not a politician. He just wants to make sure he palpably loves his country. Whereas I think those on the other side palpably don't and want to dismantle it as much as possible.
How much of a similarity do you think there is? I've heard you speak about this in the past, where you've said you have voted Labour in the past, but you would never do so again, at least under Keir Starmer, for the reason that, well, obviously the Reclaim Party exists now, and that's because simply he bent the knee. And do you think that actually, as has Joe Biden, do you think you see sort of similarities between the Democratic Party and the Labour Party?
Yeah, certainly. I think Keir is, not only did he take the knee, he then went on to do a speech about systemic and structural inequality in the UK, and you can tell exactly where he's got that manual from. And then he's gone and completed his unconscious bias training. So one wonders how well that will wash as people's livelihoods are trashed across this country, and why he isn't providing any valid opposition to this government dragging us all into an absolute disaster zone. So I can't see if he's more concerned with unconscious bias training than people's livelihoods. I'm not sure how he's going to get voted in again. I certainly wouldn't vote for him.
Now, can we speak about your appearance on Jeremy Vine?
Yeah,
I know you're probably sick to death of speaking about it because it's certainly been doing the rounds. But Channel 5, I've just read this before I took this call with you. They said they're not surprised that they've had so many complaints since you appeared on the show alongside Yasmin Alibhai-Brown. I'm just going to quickly play the clip and then we'll discuss.
I usually shop because I thought their response was so brilliant. But to go back to...
Well, he says they diluted it as a result of it.
They stood up to a racist bully, I thought.
Did you just call me a racist bully?
Yes, I did actually.
I was so looking forward for the first court case, and it's you.
Oh, good. Okay.
You do need to justify that, Yasmin.
Well, because he said it wasn't just, it was also about Black History Month. You were also objecting to Black History Month.
I didn't object to talk to Black History Month, actually, Yasmin. And I would like you to withdraw your allegation
okay,
now
I'll withdraw my allegation.
And formally apologise to me, otherwise
No, I will not formally apologise to you.
Okay.
But I will say that there is a bullying side to you.
No, you call me a racist bully.
Okay, I withdraw that.
Right.
But I will not apologise.
Was that a joke along with I want white men to be extinct?
She is proving how just how toxic the sort of culture around debate and speech is actually becoming. And that's the Reclaim Party's entire raison d'etre, isn't it?
Certainly it is. In order not to be able to use fists and knives and guns, you use language, don't you? But as she said on there, she went, "I don't agree with you on anything." So I'm sort of saying to her, well, do we agree that murder is wrong? Can we not agree on something that simple? And I think what's happened is the problem is in these longer form debates anyway, the Yasmin Alibhai-Browns of this world, who essentially are the screaming minority, they cannot hold their own in a very calm and reasonable debate, certainly with someone like me. So they end up resorting to just personal ad hominem attacks, which are very difficult. And I actually particularly find where later in the show where she called me a racist bully, I find that extremely personally hurtful, actually. Beyond anything else, bearing in mind that Reclaim takes a principled stance against all of these things, and for people to be able to use this terrible slant racist at others with no evidence towards it whatsoever destroys debate. And ultimately, what happens is, the goodwill and the confidence of people to listen and those who want to continue the conversation, which is essentially what decent discussion is about, will just get bored and stop speaking back to them. And where do we go from there? We end up more polarized, more upset, and there's a much higher likelihood that people will resort to measures beyond language, which is so unutterably sad in 2020, especially around this time of year when we're trying to remember what happens when people stop talking and the appalling consequences of that. I find it very, very sad, and I think it's extremely irresponsible for Channel 5 to allow an extremist bigot like Yasmin Alibhai-Brown on television, and I think it's deeply irresponsible for Jeremy Vine not to have stopped her dead in her tracks.
Yeah, well, especially given, if
what
some
happened to you?
Yeah, definitely,
one
definitely.
One rule for us, Darren.
It is right. Now, you've just mentioned their remembrance and our Day of Remembrance. And how important will a love of country be to your party, especially if we think about that Remembrance Sunday in general? And we're being told we have to do it from home next month due to the coronavirus. And this will be the first time in the Cenotapht's 100-year history the service in Whitehall will be closed off to members of the public. Now, many people, Laurence, and I don't think unfairly, will be wondering how we can allow mass protests to take place over the death of George Floyd in the United States of America and not a public act of remembrance for those who fought and died for those rights and freedoms to protest. I wonder what your thoughts are on this.
I think there are a couple of thousand ticketed and invited people to the staff. My thoughts on it are it's our absolute duty to remember. It's our duty to remember anyway those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice for our great country so that we can be free. And given that we are now in a period, and remembrance has been served every single year since 1919, including through the Second World War. So I think it is crucial that we do it. It's crucial that we educate our children as to why we do it, and it's crucial that it's through these traditions and the honouring of the past and our remembrance of those who died for our freedom that we come together as a nation. It's not a divisive thing. And if this sort of soft cancellation of Remembrance Sunday takes place, then you'll find that in a year's time they'll say, well, the politics was very complex back in 1914. We honour the dead and we honour those that the glorious dead, how awful and tragic the whole situation was. Today I'm going to be recording some war poems and linking to the British Legion, I think, because they've not been selling poppies. I think it's important that we try and remember all this week and do whatever we can to share stories of our families and our loved ones and lost ones in all conflicts and those ongoing. And Yeah, I'm very sad that the de facto go-to place in this country nowadays is when something important happens, is we go and stand on our doorsteps and clap. It's like, no, I think we gather and we remember. It's a very poignant 2 minutes. That it's a very it's a very important thing. It's crucial. We're free. Well, that's that's questionable at the moment, but I feel very passionately about it and our great country.
The Reclaim Party, is the launch still going ahead next month?
I think what we're going to do is we're probably going to do it in the beginning of the new year.
Okay.
Because I think by that point, what I intend to do will be very much more. It will have the possibility of being more powerful, because we're entering a period of. It feels like we're entering a period of we're in a national daydream at the moment, and the government are stoking the fear into the press, and the press stoke the fear into us, and it just revolves around and around and around and around. And I think that there is going to be a critical mass where people go, enough. And I think that what I'm aiming to offer the electorate is going to be important, and it needs to be delivered at the right time. So, we haven't actually totally decided whether it's going to be next month or whether we wait to the beginning of the new year, when this message is going to be an absolute alternative to what we're being given now. So it's under discussion.
I think many people are excited to see what you actually get up to with the party, because a lot of people are very. I'm gonna swear. Actually, a lot of people are quite pissed off with the belief that their vote and their voice has been ignored and sidelined for far too long, and they can't actually believe the sort of pandering to those who simply do not wish our nation well.
Well, do we even have a government and an opposition at the moment? I can't see the Conservatives behaving conservatively particularly, and I don't see the opposition opposing them, which I thought is the whole system of democracy. There's rumours that we're going to have elections delayed. So if you start to really think about where we're at, we're in a lot of trouble, and what we're going to come with Reclaim is starting with a very, very, very simple thing, which is implementable and a very strong statement of what we're going to do. And the reclamation will begin in a particular area, and then we will start to roll out the other policies. But people absolutely must have the freedom to express themselves, to not self-censor in the way that we are doing now, and to not be shouted down for having what is essentially a very normal, non-controversial mainstream opinion. And the public deserve a government that represents them, and not the best interests of the government or their own fear, which is how they're ruling us now. We're not being led, we're being ruled by fear, and we actually need a hopeful alternative.
I'm interested in that thought about self-censorship, because again, you've discussed this in the past. I do actually listen to your interviews, and you talk about the fact that you'll be able to walk on, you hope or you long for a day when you'll be able to walk onto a film set and just be able to chat to other actors who are able to voice their opinions in an open and frank way without fearing saying the same thing on Twitter, because right now the chilling effect on debate and speech has seeped so far into that world and every other that many who don't have platforms like yours are absolutely terrified, shit scared to voice their opinions for fear of losing their livelihoods. Do you think we'll get there? Will your party aim to tackle that wider cultural issue?
It's the centre of what we're aiming to attack. Well, it's not to attack, it's to remedy and reclaim. We need to get back to how we were talking. I spent 10 years on a set with Kevin Whately, who is, he's a lefty at the end of the day. But we would argue, we would disagree, and we would end up both knowing that we wanted the best for our country and for people. So it was fine. And then suddenly this intellectual fragility that has started to seep out of universities. It starts in schools, and it goes all the way through universities into our institutions, which is there is one way of thinking, a correct way of thinking, a so-called moral way of thinking, which essentially is just a overzealous fanaticism about how one communicates. And actually, we need to return to a very simple idea, which is good manners, I think, of which I often fail, but and fairness and the ability to robustly disagree with someone. That is crucial. Without that, you cannot improve your argument. It's like we feel like we've arrived at this sort of apotheosis of civilization, where this wonderful new, extremely fragile generation have walked in and said, we've got there. It's the end, and this is how you're all to behave. But actually, it's the most divisive, aggressive movement I think we've seen. I asked my father actually yesterday whether he'd known anything as bad, and he said no. I said, not even the Cuban Missile Crisis and things like that, and all the way through communism. And he said, no, it's never been as bad as it is now.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's pretty bloody terrifying, isn't it? So you're there. You're our only hope, Laurence. How does that feel? That's quite the burden on your shoulders.
I'm not, Darren. I'm not the only thing, because inside everybody, and I mean this, inside everybody in their heart, they know what I'm saying is true, but they're putting the amount of pressure that's being put on them. It forces them into submission through the fear of losing your livelihood, through cancel culture, and through the horrible tactics of those that are unwilling to have a debate. And the thing is, I think it's not about me. It's about me saying, I'll take the punches. You can punch me in the face as much as you want, because I do have a platform and I'm not going to be quiet about it. So those downstream of me who are in employment and scared, I meet them on a daily basis, scared of saying, well, I don't want to do unconscious bias training because I don't think I'm a racist, that if I'm standing up for them, then I'm giving them, at least I hope, a chance to say, well, actually, I'm okay. Within me, I'm okay, and I can express myself. So the strength, what I'm saying is, I'm hoping to reclaim the language enough for people to use it confidently of their own accord, not through me being their only hope. But I'm also a bit of a, I'm like you. I don't object to having to do it. I think it's important. Someone's got to do it.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. Might as well be two of us who are absolutely bloody insane.
We're not insane. We just know we're not insane. We just know what we think. And we're willing to talk to people, and that is apparently extremism.
Yeah.
Now, imagine what extremism would look like if you really suppress these ideas.
And this is one thing that makes me laugh. How many times have you and I been told that our views are controversial? And I sort of think about this. I know you were not a massive Remainer. You did vote Remain, but you accepted the democratic outcome after the Leave vote. But on Brexit, I had the views of the majority. On Defund and the BBC, a majority of people are saying that the licence fee isn't fit for purpose and that actually the BBC wastes our money. On so many issues, Laurence, cultural issues, especially on statues and all the rest of it, the public are like, what the hell is going on here? How the hell are our views controversial? Maybe to a sort of small set which dominate the media class, the political class of metropolitan liberals who all think the same thing and are all very much pro-censorship and very much pro-pandering to a minority of very vocal activists in this country. We are not controversial. And that's one thing that winds me up so much.
Yes, I did an interview with Times Radio the other day, and I was constantly, Tom Newton-Dunn kept saying, these are very controversial opinions. I kept having to say, no, Tom, what you don't understand is these are the mainstream opinions. These are the majority views, the ones that I'm voicing in the main. I'm sure I've got some views that are, a bit much for some people. That's fine. Or I've got some views that aren't enough for some people. But yes, it's another way of unbalancing the playing field by saying, oh, we're going to speak to Darren Grimes now. He's a bit crazy, he's very controversial, and it's a way of manipulating your audience. But the thing is, what they forget, and as my wonderful dad said to me, he said, if you want to be a successful actor, never underestimate the intelligence of your audience. And as I got out of a cab the other day and got given yet another free cab ride, thank you, Mr. Cab Rides, he articulated, the driver, he was so grateful, and he articulated in a way I've never heard a politician be able to do, what he thought about where we were as a society. And I just thought, these are the people. And, the great thing is every time you put the vote to them, they tend to come up with something sensible. So, let's give them something sensible to vote for, and hopefully we can make a difference. I mean, it's difficult, but we'll do what we can.
I know you can't go into detail about policy positions, but if we can just talk about broad principles as a father, you as a father, not me, obviously. How worried are you about all of this divisive critical race theory nonsense? We've obviously heard very positive soundings by Kemi Badenoch, who is the Equalities Minister, recently on this stuff being illegal, and therefore teachers should not be, pandering to it in our classrooms. What are your thoughts? What will be your stance if you just give me sort of broad principles without actually going into policy proposals?
It's banned. It will be banned as it, and it is illegal, but it will be totally removed from schools. We're looking very strongly into education, and I think anyone that ultimately critical race theory, as it says, is that any structural inequalities that based solely down to racism is palpably not true. There is so many more factors, societal factors, that one has to take into account. So critical race theory is ultimately poison. And to say that it also does assert that anyone who has white skin is fundamentally a racist. So I think people have started to see past it to a degree, but it's quite a specific area. But I think racism is bad, full stop. I think it's full, but I also believe that we're a very tolerant country. We need to find specific examples of racism, and then we can all stand up against them. But to wash 65 million people with the brush of racism is about the most divisive thing you can do. So certainly in terms of Reclaim, any government-funded institution, any establishment that receives any public money that does anything to do with critical race theory or unconscious bias under Reclaim would lose that money.
What would your advice be to parents who are actually a little bit worried about what their children are being taught in the classroom, but actually are quite fearful about voicing said concerns? Because I do hear this quite a lot. I get quite a lot of emails about this. And especially people in workplaces as well, Laurence, who are being told that they have to have unconscious bias training and all the rest of it. They're scared to actually voice these opinions. What is your message to these people?
That to refuse to do it, say no, and that's it. The unconscious bias training, it has no legal standing, wouldn't hold up in a court of law. No one ever gets the same result twice. It's the people that came up with the idea have distanced themselves from it hugely. It's been utterly politicized in order, again, to silence any opposing thought. So if you're a parent and you want your child to have a well-balanced and full education, write to your head teacher, find out what they're teaching children, certainly in terms of Black History Month, because a lot of the negative organizations are quite high up on Google searches in terms of what their products they're offering to teachers to teach in these areas, and keep a close eye on your kids. But I think parents, the most wonderful thing is, around this country, people generally just want to get on with their lives, raise their children, love their children. Life is more difficult than ever at the moment. So we don't need our kids being told that they're all racists as well. That doesn't help anybody. So yes, speak to the head teacher, refuse to do it. And, they're the Free Speech Union have been excellent in this area, and there are a lot of organisations. And, I will be I'll be saying, look, we're going to reclaim an area where it's okay not to tell your children that they're racist. Teach them how to think. Teach them good manners. Teach them how to think for themselves. Teach them how to spot values in others that they agree with or don't disagree with, and to search and question them. Teach them how to talk. Teach them how to be confident in their expressions. Teach children from different backgrounds across the spectrum good ways of communicating with each other. because you get kids from very underprivileged homes who for really awful upbringings, who suddenly become a little bit more grown up, and they've not had someone query their mind. They've not had someone say, what do you think about this stuff? So they become shy. So there are chances and there are opportunities of really getting the opportunity of the equality of opportunity that they deserve. It's not being given to them. So schools need to focus on this. And that's what they need to do, especially in PHSE. And we need to have a place where kids are taught simple things: manners, respect, fairness. Competitiveness is not bad. Lots of things that help kids develop emotionally and physically and socially.
I mean, I'm
on a rant today.
Yeah, no, I love it. I'm really quite, I just scream. This won't be a surprise to you at all, but I scream at the television quite often, and I'm just thinking, man, what are we doing to our next generation of kids? Which is, if you look at the polling, there are a large section of our young people who are terrified, Laurence. One, they've been told that they should have some inherent guilt about their privilege by just accident of birth, the colour of their skin. And two, that they should be terrified that they are going to drown to death because of climate change. And you just think, we are tormenting our children in schools. That's unacceptable.
And then they're tormenting themselves on social media afterwards. I'm not envious of being a young person alive today. Certainly, it should be mandatory for schools to teach both positions. If you're going to, at the very least, there has to be a compromise position on climate change. So you have to, if you're going to tell, there's a very sad thing actually, which is a very modern postmodern way of looking at of children and teaching them, is that they're basically taught that there's some nasty little virus on this planet that's causing it to get hotter and hotter and hotter until they all burn to death. And that's not what you should teach children. What you should teach children is, inside of you might be the answer to this. And deep down inside of one of them, there will be the answer to this. Do you know what I mean? It's not to deny climate change and man-made climate change. Absolutely, no one's denying that. But one needs to teach the alternative position, Bjorn Lomborg and also Schellenberger, and just go, look, there are two sides to this story, guys. And what's good is that, do you want your child to be hopeful and optimistic and go out into the world courageously and fearlessly? Or do you want that child to go out into the world shrinking and terrified? Because then if someone does wish you ill, and on a larger scale, on a more national scale, if someone does wish you ill and your young people are not equipped to deal with that, then that will have national consequences and possibly global consequences. Confidence, fearlessness. It's okay to make a mistake. This is the other thing about the language. It's very important that we know that it's through speaking that we understand what we feel often. And so you're going to make mistakes while you do it. Twitter doesn't help because it has this permanence to it, which I think it's a cesspit, but it has a permanence as well. So it's very difficult. I think they should probably just introduce a retract button. So if someone says something stupid, and they can just go retract, and the tweet stays up and it goes, this was retracted by the author. They have modified their understanding of a position. That's a great way. But these companies stoke this sort of division as well. So yes, what I would just say is, fearlessness. Be fearless, be strong, and be courageous, and be okay, and make mistakes. I love them.
Is that one of your biggest reservations with the lockdown, Laurence? That actually we are hampering the futures of the next generation?
Well, we're hampering the futures of the poorest and most disadvantaged in society. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's, all of the stats are clear on that. We're destroying those futures of these people who have not had an opportunity to, they're saying that the online schooling stats for kids that come from underprivileged homes are much, much lower time spent in front of the online schooling. So it's good that they're back at school, but also who suffers in a lockdown? Who are the people that are going to suffer the most? It's going to be the poorest and the most disadvantaged, which is why I find being lectured to by those with 100-foot gardens and large mansions a bit irritating. We need to think of people that you can't lock people up in their houses all day when they don't have a garden, they can't get out, and also the evidence points to the fact that it doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. Now we are sat having a conversation right now.
Yes.
I mean, admittedly, we agree with each other, but I'd like to think that even if we disagreed with each other on, and I'm sure there will be some issue we disagree with each other on, that we'd be able to have a conversation about it. What a bloody novel idea. Do you think that we'll ever get to a place where we can have proper dialogue and actually, crucially for me, forgiveness? Being able to accept someone holding their hands up and saying, I got it wrong. Will we ever accept that again? Or being able to just disagree or hear opinions and not immediately reach for the cancellation button?
I think it's going to be very difficult unless we do try and revert to some of the values that have been lost. Is certainly spiritual values. That's not to say, become a sort of Bible bashing person, but even if you look at the Bible as treat it as a secular manual on some level, it's got some good advice on how to forgive, and it's all boils down essentially to personal responsibility, a lot of it. So yes is the answer, because otherwise what's the point? And I think what people need is it needs to just be unlocked. You just gently unlock it for people. So I see, as much as I say I want to step back on an acting set, judging by the response I got to some of the actors I asked to do a Poppy video appeal based nothing to do with my politics, I'm not sure that's ever going to happen. But it's a 20-year project essentially. It starts with kids in schools and it ends with graduates, and it's going to be, it will get there. But we are at a very, very, very dangerous time in Western civilization, in my view. And if someone, I think it's 12 to 18 months, the next 12 to 18 months will be the most seminal time in the last, since the last war, I'd say. Mm-hmm.
Does that ever upset you? You're quite we've just both had a conversation in which we've said that, we're both willing to put our head above the parapet. But does it ever upset you when you get responses like you have from actors on a Poppy appeal? That's quite a selfless thing. You're not doing it to further, you're actually doing it for charity, right? It is as fundamental as that. And they're rejecting it on the grounds of your politics. Does that upset you on a human level?
Well, I think, it's really interesting when essentially one is trying to do something very, very as positive as one can, as a I feel sort of duty bound to do it, and that it is, as you said, earlier about the controversial stuff, that people will willfully misrepresent what you're doing. But I think in time, yes, I find it very hurtful, but you can't get anywhere without going through difficulty. This is another thing we have to teach kids. Life isn't a piece of cake. Anything that you're going to go through some really bad and difficult things to get to somewhere good. And for me, I know that what I'm doing is important because it's already had an effect. I've started noticing the government has started saying things. All of a sudden, started paying attention to some cultural issues. And B, I'm not doing it for any other reason other than that's the right thing to do. I'm not adopting any position which I don't think is it's compassionate, and it's mutually respectful, and it's for the best. So yeah, it hurts like hell, but I don't care. Sod it. Keep punching.
And actually, I think and I've noticed this over the last 4 years of my life with the Electoral Commission saga. And by the way, Laurence, best of luck, mate, with them. But anyway, have they approved your party yet, by the way?
Oh,
that's all.
Go there. I mean, but I mean,
I know.
The whole of that. Well, it'll be very interesting to see how quickly Black Lives Matter go through the Electoral Commission, won't it?
Mm-hmm. Piss up in a brewery springs to mind.
It'll be interesting. I'd quite like to debate a Black Lives Matter candidate on the hustings.
That would be very good value, and see if there's any consensus reached. No, now,
hopefully,
with my well, yeah, exactly. That would be very nice. But with my Electoral Commission and then the Starkey incident as well with the Metropolitan Police, you sort of realise who actually matters in life. And I actually think there's something quite rewarding about that. So it is sad that you've lost these friends, but then you think, well, if actually our friendship was on such a superficial level, then actually my life's better off without you in it.
I agree. It's like any traumatic, difficult thing you go through in life, you always work out who your friends are. And those friends tend to be those that are loyal to you, regardless of your differences. They just are loyal to you because they love you as a person, or they've made the decision that their loyalty and their friendship means more than what you think about a certain issue. It's the willful misrepresentation that I find hurtful. Mm-hmm. It's like, you know exactly who I am and what I think. You know what I am and what I think. So for you to deliberately ignore the last several years of our relationship because it's not cool or trendy just shows that, you know, one day when we meet again and we have a chat and a beer, it'll take me a while to respect your consistency and your, you know. But I suppose what happens is people who do not have deep held feelings about things, they gather together, don't they? You know, your little elitists in London, and they say, we have to think this is what we think, this is the compassionate thing, and we cannot be scrutinized. And that's essentially people like you and I and the rest of the wonderfuls of, as far as I'm concerned. You know, I've not met a single person from this side of the conversation that isn't really into listening and helping and supporting. And I just think, great. Toby Young would do anything for anybody, and he's demonized, you know, and he'd do anything for anybody. And as would my really good mates. So I think we're actually, you know, all we need to do is put it, like you say, put a bit of forgiveness into it. Bring the comedy back as well, because the comedy is so crucial. It's missing so much from our chat. And, you know, we'll then become the culture, and then we'll need to be attacked by that lot again.
Mm-hmm. Well, and by the way, people should join the Free Speech Union, because, I mean, it's a fantastic and so crucial outfit. But if we keep on the theme of charity, I think, and think about Marcus Rashford's free school meals row, and Laurence, we've seen a real outpouring of community and charity in action, which for me, it's really brilliant to see. Now, this won't make me very popular in certain circles, but I know from my own background that many new and first-time Conservative voters that work very hard to put food on the table for their kids take actually great exception to the idea that someone next door might be given a food voucher from the state to do the same thing for nothing. As uncomfortable as that view might make some feel, a reliance upon the state in these communities is rejected in many working class communities. I'm just wondering what your view is on all of this. First of all, with the sort of the charity that have really stepped up and community-minded approach to dealing with people who are struggling during the government's absolutely crazy economic response to coronavirus. But secondly, the idea that actually the Labour Party seem to view all working class people as a sort of social care project to be managed. And a lot of them reject that wholesale, my family included. What do you think about that?
I think it's what a wonderful thing, what a wonderful country we live in, for the massive outpouring and expression of charity to others, which is just there, always under the surface anyway, in this great and brilliant nation of ours, and United Kingdom. And then I think in terms of the Marcus Rashford thing, I think it was tricky, because it's, you know, they're looking at lockdowns and how people are going to, again, how the most disadvantaged are going to pay for their dinner, as simple as that. I think there are exceptions to when the state should intervene in these areas, but fundamentally, I think when it comes to feeding your children, that comes ahead of an iPhone upgrade, and it comes ahead of absolutely everything else. And I think that for the vast majority it does, but obviously in any society there are people that will abuse and use the state above and beyond what it's meant to do, and those people tend to make better newspaper copy, and that's what happens. The media just set fire to it, and you get Piers Morgan getting very on side. I think it's very noble what Marcus Rashford's trying to do, but I think ultimately the broader conversation about what the state should and shouldn't be providing is smaller. We should have a smaller state, but if kids are suffering from food poverty, then that does need addressing. Must be.
Yeah. I wonder, how optimistic are you that the Reclaim Party will soon
Rule the world.
Well, that would be nice, but there won't be for you. There won't be any need for the Reclaim Party because Boris Johnson will be like, you know what, Lossa, I completely agree with you, mate. I'm going to adopt every single one of your policies, and you can call it a day. How optimistic are you?
Not very, but if he did, great. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not egotistical enough to go, I want, also, can I just tell you, by the way, what a nightmare it is running a political party, just in terms of logistics. The amount of stuff one has to do every day is very, very complex. In the olden days, I just used to lie on rooftops in Mallorca waiting to film, drinking gin and tonics and, learning the odd line. This is a 7 a.m. till 11 o'clock a night job every single day of the week. So I'm not that optimistic because I'm not sure that Boris is a Conservative. And I'm not really convinced that Cummings is a Conservative either. And so I think, we'll see. Well, that's the only thing. All that I exist for, essentially. Obviously, we've got first past the post. It's very unlikely that we're ever going to get anyone in Parliament. But the Brexit Party never got anyone in Parliament, and UKIP only got those that crossed the floor, and they changed culture more than any political party did on their own. So hopefully we will. We're working with the most interesting people, and you'd be absolutely astonished, those who come and say, I'd really like to offer some help here if you want. And people that you would not, you go, wow, really? You? Oh, okay. So I'm optimistic that we will be able to make a big impact to this national and certainly the culture conversation, which is very fascinating to me. And if the Tories want to, once we announce our policies, nick all of them, and then I'll go, fine, you can have them, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm just make sure you implement them. Because, the problem sometimes with the Conservatives is they'll make a noise and they'll say they'll do something and then they just drop it 5 minutes later. It's that they're a very malleable political force sometimes, aren't they?
They are. If we look to across the channel, the English channel, and we go to France. Now, France, my heart breaks for them. And, I think our hearts go out to the French people who must be going through an absolutely terrible ordeal at the minute and have been for many years now, actually. Yet still, Laurence, the French people, their polity is so strong. They are such a deeply, intensely patriotic people. They will not let these people, these barbarians, using medieval tactics, terror tactics, they will not allow them to dampen their spirit and their patriotism. And there's just part of me that my heart goes out to them, and it's such a beautiful thing to see the French people say, we will not be cowed by this. I wonder what you've been thinking of what's been happening over the past few weeks.
Well, it's just awful, and France has got again, each country is different. France has a very large Muslim community that has been, one could argue, systemically deprived of opportunity, with the banlieue and stuff like that. And at the same time, when people start chopping people's heads off and all of this, I do sometimes, part of me wants to be very upset and attack the religion, but another part of me wants to go, well, what about these nutters who lean out of windows in Las Vegas and kill 75 people or 100 and however many people they were killed with their M16s? Is there just an element to the fact that these are just murderous lunatics as well? But certainly in what I can't bear is I now know what the Church of England's policy views on Brexit are. I know what the Church of England's views on immigration are. I have no idea what the Church of England's views on radical Islamism are. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it is a big problem. It's really it's just a terribly sad thing. And I think if you're chopping people's heads off in the name of your religion, then you might not be doing celebrating, honouring your religion. That's what I feel. I think the vast majority of Muslims are not like this.
I mean, we even know what the Church of England's view is on Dominic Cummings, for God's sake. For God's sake, quite.
It's sad. We should be able to. The problem with, again, where we're entering into a very difficult area is this idea of blasphemy. We must be able. It's one of the. It's central to democracy that you can blaspheme, and this idea of ramping up by fear. And trust me, I know this because having even vaguely mentioned it, I now have to be much more careful of my own security. Is that the idea that everything is there to be. It's not that I would want to particularly blaspheme, but one of the side effects of freedom of speech is the right to blasphemy, and whether you like it or not, and that's it. No ifs, no buts, and it's sneaking in this sort of. I think that's probably why hardcore fundamentalist Islamism and wokeism they don't disagree with each other, because they would like to cancel any form of blasphemy, and this woke blasphemy and this is an extreme Islamist blasphemy. But I do want to reiterate that that a large part of me thinks that some of these people are just unhinged, murderous sods, and we should be very careful to in terms of our relations with different religions, to do what God would want us to do, which is to be peaceful and loving and respectful of each other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, listen, we've covered quite a lot of ground, and I want to end on a cheery note. And
Sure.
I want you to sort of tell me why actually, Darren, you're being a miserable bloody sod. Pack it in. This country is an absolutely fantastic country, and I'd say, Laurence, I agree. But we're not going to the dogs. We are actually going to reverse the culture. The Reclaim Party's going to be at the forefront of that fight. And shut your mouth, Darren, everything's going to be fine. Tell me why I'm absolutely wrong.
We exist, Darren, because a hole has appeared in our culture, and that hole needs to be filled by people who want to celebrate the best things about our country. The people that want to be free in their expression, they want to be able to use their language, and they want to support everyone of all different skin colours and sexual orientations and ethnicities, and unite under the greatness that is Great Britain. And we just need to be reminded of it. It's coming, and it's going to be good. I promise.
Well, brilliant. Laurence, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Darren, so much for having me.
Now, as ever, please do hit that little subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future content. And as I say, the GoFundMe page, we're over halfway to our target, so please do support us if you can. Cheers for joining. Bye now.